Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey, and I came to a realization the other day when I was preaching on my other podcast, Radiating Faith. I was said something about that we were on YouTube, and I was like, it's just me in a cowboy hat with sunglasses preaching religion. And then I was like, you know what? I just realized that all my people who are out there listening on podcast only didn't know that I was wearing a cowboy hat this whole time. Couple of nukes, I've mentioned it before, but I realized on my other podcast, I was like, they have no idea. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you are listening to this right now, not only am I wearing a cowboy hat, I'm wearing a brand new one, fresh out the mail, unfortunately. I could not find any cowboy hats in person nearby, which is very preferable for a man trying to buy a cowboy hat. You don't want to. Amazon was great. I got it the next day, but I had to return three other ones through the mail, so it was rather inconvenient. And summer season, and I finally got my white hat. I was supposed to have it about 4 months ago, 5 months ago, so I am done violating the cowboy code of conduct, but I'm having trouble with the studio lighting, getting it's like I have a shiny white reflective orb in my head. But yeah, for those of you who didn't know, we're available on YouTube. We are available on YouTube. And there are little just hints I have at like what today's episode will be about. If you didn't read the title for some reason, like my hoodie, because we will be talking about sleep today. And when I joined the military, they are very particular about the bed sheets being folded a certain way. I believe it's 45-degree angle, very very particular. You've got to make your bed every morning, unless you're like me. And what you do is you don't touch the blankets, you don't touch the sheets, you just sleep on top of it in a hoodie. That's how I got through the entire military. I began this journey of just throwing on a hoodie and sleeping wherever. And my hoodies would be my blanket. So I want to wear a hoodie in honor of that. Feel like I'm sleeping. Got the cosmic space background behind me because there is no better place to sleep than outside looking at the stars if you're not surrounded by mountain lions or something. But yeah, I am here with Ms. Tracy, and she is a sleep therapist. And as soon as I saw her profile online, I was like, she needs to come on the show. My military listeners and their families need to sleep. My blue collar listeners need to sleep. And people in general, due to addictions to their phone now, also need to learn how to sleep and put that phone down, which I'm sure we'll get into that. So, Ms. Tracy, after that long-winded intro, would you please tell us a bit about yourself and who you are and what you do as a sleep therapist and what that does for everyone?
Thanks so much for bringing me on first. I'm really excited to be here. I'm looking forward to having a nice in-depth conversation with you for all of your audience. My name's Tracy Hannigan, and I'm a qualified sleep therapist. I work in the UK exclusively via Zoom, and I only work with adults who have insomnia. Um, Really, really rewarding work. I've been doing it for quite a long time now. In previous careers and iterations of my working life, I've worked with sleep indirectly in a lot of different ways, working in community mental health in the United States when I was there, working in pain clinics here in the UK, but have branched off and work exclusively with people who have sleeping difficulties now.
And if I'm someone who is not diagnosed as having insomnia, but I still have trouble sleeping, can I still use your services?
Yeah. So one of the things that I do, because I'm a qualified healthcare provider, I have to screen people to make sure that they are
Okay.
appropriate for treatment. So somebody might think that they have insomnia, but they have sleep procrastination, or they have a circadian rhythm disorder that makes it difficult for them to fall asleep, or they wake up early, or something else might be going on, might be restless leg syndrome or sleep apnea, and it's not been diagnosed yet. Those things show up quite differently, and I assess for those first. So if people aren't sure if I can help, I have a chat with them first to make sure that I can.
That's awesome. So I remember actually my youngest sister, she would go through huge growth spurts. She's very tall. And when she went through those growth spurts, her leg pains were so bad she could not sleep at all. And she would be in pain, and she would almost have kind of symptoms of, restless leg syndrome just because of the way her legs were growing. She bean sprout kind of kid. And I remember it was long nights for her and my mom because my mom would go come for her. But how do you go about diagnosing that? So do you have common symptoms that you look at and based off what they tell you, you can kind of you have a level of knowledge where you can assess like, hey, this is most likely this or that. And are you like a licensed professional in the aspect that that is a medical diagnosis, or you tell them this is most likely what they have, and then they have to go get a second opinion?
Yeah, because I'm not a sleep physician, I can't
Okay.
quote unquote diagnose, and I don't have access to a sleep lab, which would be required for diagnosing some of these things.
Right.
But insomnia and other sleep disorders, they almost fall into separate camps. If somebody has restless leg syndrome or sleep apnea, there might be some signs there. People waking up with headaches, frequent urination at night, those sorts of things. But the sleeping element itself, what happens is insomnia, people tend to be tired and wired. There's a certain level of arousal or
Right.
hypervigilance there that makes it difficult for people to sleep. It also makes it difficult for people to nap during the day. They just can't quite have a low enough arousal to get into that state very easily. Whereas a lot of the other sleep disorders, yes, they interrupt sleep and they create sleeping issues, but they don't have the arousal component. So how that shows up, instead of being tired and wired, people are being what they call it pathological sleepiness. So people are sleepy, falling asleep in unusual places throughout the day. So it shows up quite differently in the daytime. Other signs and symptoms might indicate kind of maybe looking in one direction or another, but I always support people in making appropriate referrals if that's necessary.
Alrighty. And I think I might have insomnia, honestly. I've never seen a doctor, but I know my father has it and was diagnosed with it. And I don't know if it is it genetic? Can you verify that? Or is it more
Most
likely?
insomnia is psychobiological.
Okay.
What I would say is I don't have a single client, I don't think,
Right.
who has found their way to me who doesn't have some sort of anxiety issue. And those can be both nature and nurture. There can be a bit of a genetic predisposition there. That's not to say that no insomnia is genetic, but a lot of the
Mm,
times what creates long-standing insomnia is a certain kind of response to a situation or to sleeplessness
okay.
itself. And that response tends to be higher in people who have a tendency to be anxious.
And I think several decades of my father being like, I have insomnia, so you have it since I was born probably did not help at all. I struggle a lot with my sleep. You actually mentioned specifically one of my issues, which is I cannot sleep during the day. I mean, I've pulled
Mm.
all-nighters before. I could be very tired, but I just cannot sleep during the day. It has to be a certain threshold of night, which I'm so interested in studying all this now. Is it because I believe nighttime is more peaceful during the day? Because I do have paranoia condition and stuff, so I am paranoid. And I guess I'm like daytime is when people are around and stuff. And I also hate the idea of missing out on a day, especially being in the military when your free time is more limited. The idea of
Mhm.
sleeping away your free time is something that has very irked me. And
Yeah.
I have
That happens when you turn 50 as well, by the way. You sort of feel like you don't want to waste any of the time that you have.
right. The days are slipping by too
They
soon.
really are.
Yeah, and so when it comes to sleeping, it's also I envy my dog so much because she sleeps so much all throughout the day, all throughout the night. And I was thinking about it, about the difference between her and I. And not only am I an overthinker, but just as a human being compared to whatever she's thinking about is either food, going to the bathroom, or sleeping. So,
It's
she
very
does, I
simple
think
for them.
it is. I think it really is. We look at animals just go to sleep,
Yeah.
especially I guess the dogs are smart enough to realize they're not in an environment. I mean, she knows that my house is a safe environment because to her, there's she's never been attacked in it. There's no animals in it. To me, I'm thinking a guy could break in the door right now. Is every
Mhm.
window secure? I've got all these thoughts.
Mhm.
She's just sleeping, all the time. She's on my lap sleeping right now. She's mad I woke up early to record with someone from the UK, which I want to bring up for people again not watching on YouTube. Miss Tracy is drinking tea, which further propagates my constant commentary on the show when I have British, guests at, tea time, the whole British joke, but it's iced tea. So she
It
is
is.
combining the Southern culture of the show with the UK culture, having iced tea. So it's like still
Yeah. It's
British,
not
but
quite
we're gonna
sweet tea, but it's good.
Oh, okay, yeah. I hope it's not unsweet tea. I'm not a fan of that. So
Yeah, there's no sugar in this. It just has a bit of a natural sweetness to it.
okay, okay.
Mm. I
We'll
do love
see.
sweet tea though. Mm.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny. I had a shipmate of mine. I don't think I've shared this before. He would just dump so much sugar in his tea. He would put like multiple cups of it. And this was hot tea. He would put it in hot tea, which was interesting. Like, it would be black tea or green tea, and he would just put Domino sugar down a sponsor. He would just get like two, 3 cups of it. I'm like, man, you have some tea on your sugar. I was like, it was interesting. It was
Sounds
super
like
nice.
sludge to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had a shipmate at the same table with me would do that to his oatmeal. He would put almost the whole container, the big square containers, he would put like half of it on his oatmeal. We're like,
It's
guy, you
almost
got a
like it's
little
for
bit of oatmeal.
texture. It sounds
Yeah,
like
we
it's
were
for
like,
texture for anything else.
oh yeah, we were like, you got a little bit of oatmeal on your sugar pile there, bud. But yeah, so
Yeah,
Miss
yeah.
Miss Tracy, can you tell us about your journey with sleep? Do you have insomnia? Have you fought against these things? And what kind of pushed you into this field of work?
Yeah, interesting question. So way back when I had two bouts of insomnia. If you add up all of the numbers of years together, it's probably like 8-ish years, 10 years maybe.
Okay.
First bout was after the death of my spouse, which of course you would expect to have some sleeplessness after an
Right.
event like that. But it went on for years and years and years. It essentially began to feed itself and transformed from sleeplessness into its own thing, which is that is insomnia. And then I wasn't sure at that point what exactly got me through that particular bout, but moving on in life, many, many years later, I had a second bout and came through it actually using the kinds of approaches that I now use today with clients. Although they were definitely not called this, they weren't called this, they weren't identified as the same sort of thing,
Right.
but the themes are very similar. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting how psychological it is because for the past few years, I have been with Ms. Whitney now, and she cannot sleep without a nightlight. And it has become to the point that I can no longer sleep without a nightlight because it has been so required for the past few years. I can still do it because for years I never slept with a nightlight, but her whole life has always had one. She's not a big fan of the dark, and that's understandable. So she always likes to have at least a small nightlight in the room or like a star projection, something.
Mhm.
And it's gotten to the point now where it's like I can sleep without it, but it is highly, highly preferred. And it will bother me if I'm like, it's so dark in here. What is this? It's so
Yeah.
unfamiliar to me now. But,
Yeah.
I had been, and it's, you know what? In fact, a lot of military members will sleep with a red light on to prepare themselves for sleeping on the submarine or on the aircraft carrier. And a lot of I'd have to see how many veterans carry that with them. But when I know active duty wise, when we were at the barracks room or at home, like my roommate bought a red light
Mhm.
to sleep with to, simulate that. So it's very
Such a
interesting.
very, very interesting because we have these cues, these contextual cues for sleep. Bed is usually a contextual cue for sleep. Darkness can be helpful. It's not necessarily mandatory. Well, I'm sure we're going to talk about what I call safety behaviors, like having to have things a certain way. We're definitely going to talk
Right.
about that. I think it's going to fit neatly here. But these contextual cues are really, really powerful and they're subconscious. Like I talk a lot with people about that subconscious relationship with the bed. And, we spend a lot of years getting in and out of bed. Bed is the place that we're either sleeping or we're feeling safe and warm and welcome. And then we take our life and we go out and we do lots of exciting things. And then this is
Right.
the place that we return to sleep. So our body and our brain says this is where sleep happens. And it gets confused when people start working on their laptops for hours in bed and it
Right.
or becomes a place where if you are tossing and turning and panicking and worrying about things, the brain and the body start to say, oh, I get into bed and this is where my brain wakes up and starts thinking about lots and lots of things. Yeah, so
Right.
it's powerful and that can be a plus and it can be a minus.
Well, and humans are very much creatures of habit, and we will form habits knowingly and unknowingly. And
Mm.
what's interesting is going into that on the aircraft carrier. I know this hard for a lot of active duty members. It's like your rack where you sleep is also your home on that ship. So it's hard to get that separation. I mean, obviously, work is separate, but when you're trying to relax somewhere or lay down, the only time you can really do so is in your rack. Obviously, there's lounge spaces and stuff, but there's other
It's
people walking
private,
around. It's
or
the only privacy
yeah.
you have. You have
Mhm.
your little curtain. And so people will often, that's where they go to read their books or be on their laptop on the ship. So I understand why a lot of military members, it's difficult for them to have what we call sleep hygiene in that separation. And I was going to say that comfortness can also be dangerous because bed rot has become a huge thing where people don't leave bed. And what happens is they form this mindset, like you said, that the bed is so comfortable. And when they dread their real life, not that sleeping isn't real life, but when they dread what's going on in the world out there, they start forming this like, well, I'm just going to stay in bed all day. It's safe
Mhm.
here. It's comfortable here, like you said. And then people end up actually waking up and feeling tired or having that urge to just keep going back to sleep, not because they're physically tired, but because they are so anxious, as you mentioned, anxiety earlier, or dreading the day that it's like,
Mhm.
well, let's just go back to our quiet place or safe
Yeah.
place. And
They
especially when
nest
you
there.
have, yeah, yeah, you
Yeah.
form a nest there. And it's like,
Yeah.
especially when you
Mhm.
have, like you said, personal stuff going on. And it's interesting how even though we can be physically tired, if we're so mentally aroused or wired, like you said, we can't fall asleep. When I
Mhm.
went to boot camp, you're awake for the first, it's almost like 30, 36 hours. It's not quite 48 because you get to go to sleep that second night, but you're awake for almost 36 hours. But it was my first time sleeping in Iraq. I was in a top bunk nonetheless, with the red lights, with all these other men around me snoring or doing this and that. I had never slept with so many people around me. I never slept with red light. It was also being in top bunk was weird, especially as a grown man. It's like as a younger kid, I shared a bunk bed at my one shore house with my younger sisters. They would have the bottom, I would have the top because it's just a little shore house, and when you're family, you do stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
have the top bunk, and then I would always sit up and hit my head on the ceiling because it was so close to it. So, but I hadn't done that in years, and also the military, you're in like this metal rack, and it's like it's
Squeak.
not that uncomfortable. You can make it comfortable, but in boot camp, you don't have you don't get a bunch of blankets, you don't get your anime girl blankets to put on the bed and be like, this is nice. So it was hard, even though I was exhausted. We had been up for 36 hours for most of us. I was never a whole all-nighters in high school kind of person. Like I didn't do that. So for me, that was the first time staying up all that time and then staying up overnight. And then all I wanted to do was sleep, but I couldn't. I was so like, what is this? How did I do this? And then I got what I often struggle with is I'm like watching the time, watching the time. Every minute that passes, I'm getting
Mm.
more frustrated, more upset, more anxious that I'm not falling asleep. It gets to the point that I'm too frustrated. And then I just stay up and then I mess up my sleep schedule. There'll be times where I'm like, if it finally gets to the point where I'm like, I'm just staying up. Forget it. Screw it. I can't fall asleep. I'll stay up and do something, and eventually I'll calm down and get tired again. And now just wake up and it's the afternoon already.
Yes, yeah. So that's a perfect example of how contextual cues can impact your ability to kind of feel calm. It's it's a survival response, right? We never would have evolved into human beings if we'd all been, out there hunting and gathering and going to sleep and then being eaten by the bear or the lion that comes by. We have to be able to have that arousal system override the biological elements of sleep, which are sleep drive and the circadian rhythm. We wouldn't be here without it. It serves a really important function, but it can go haywire on us. And that is the difference between human sleep difficulties and the fact that your dog doesn't have trouble. Cats don't tend to have trouble. You don't see birds. We got lots of birds here where I live. You don't see them having difficulty sleeping. If you were able to interview them, they probably would say, "What are you talking about?"
Right. Well,
Yeah.
they don't have a laptop in their bird's nest. They just have pieces of wood. So, but
They're
yeah,
focused on the basics, keeping
right.
safe, keeping fed, and making more of themselves.
Right. And it's interesting. I actually watched a fighting anime and they had this guy who prehistoric man they thought out of the ice and he used to fist fight dinosaurs and hunt them. And he would just go to sleep anywhere. And they're like, how can he sleep when he's surrounded by so many dangerous people? And they actually established that it was the privilege of the strongest creatures that they could sleep anywhere. Because they said they're not worried about anything attacking them, they'll just wake up and kill it. So it was a
Mhm.
very interesting theory to study. But could you break down for us, get more into like some of these keywords you're saying, like the contextual cues and some of these kind of terms, what exactly are those and what do they mean for our sleep?
That's a really great question. So when we're talking about contextual cues, we're talking about the things that trigger a response in us. So, real practical one, if you are if you're out at a concert or you're somewhere and you're standing or you at a sporting event and there's like a, well, we would call it a portaloo, but like, one of those portable bathroom things with the blue
Right.
one with the plastic door, and they're always a bit gross.
Yep.
Well, you're standing in line and say you're really, 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 really need to go.
Right.
And then somebody starts watering the grass, or you can hear water, so you hear the person in front of
Right.
you, and suddenly you're like, I really, really need to go. That's a really someone turns the water on, and suddenly, because your brain and your body say, oh, I associate that sound and this feeling with this particular action, and it suddenly becomes more urgent to you to be
Right.
able to use the
Okay.
bathroom. So, or you might not be hungry at all, but you smell something you love the taste of. And suddenly you might start
Mm.
salivating and you might start feeling hungry because you want to eat it. You're used to eating that thing. So those are contextual cues, and they're often completely unconscious. So with our bed, ideally we want to have a relationship with our bed, this unconscious one that says the bed is, yes, we might have paid a lot for the mattress and we might love our sheets, and there's this conscious level, but we have a relationship that is bed sleep, bed sleep, bed sleep, bed sleep, and that is the ideal one. We want nice, calm, relaxed feelings associated with the bed, so that way the bed is a cue, a contextual cue for sleeping. The reverse of this might be true if you're a person who likes to go and work out, but you like to be at the gym instead of doing it at home,
Mm.
because the mindset and the environment of being in the gym helps you build up your energy, and you have better
Right.
workouts when you're there as opposed to when you're in your garage or in your living
That's
room.
true.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
living
helped put
room.
us in the right state. Yeah.
Right. No, I feel you on that. When I work out in my living room, it's like I'm gonna sit down on the couch for a minute, and then it's like, oh, no longer working out. It,
No.
I get you. When I go to the gym, it's like that mindset, like we're gonna focus on this, this, and this. We're not distracted by anything.
Yeah.
What's interesting is it goes into like learned behavior and conditioning too, and it's like you're talking about you might not be hungry, but you smell something good and it makes you hungry. At the same time, it's also like you typically when you're smelling food, you're like, okay, it's time to eat. And people who work in the kitchen, the one time I was working in the kitchen industry for a little bit, I got like desensitized to it where the smell of food wasn't it's time to eat, like someone made a meal. It was a constant smell. It just meant we were at work. I actually ate less and lost my appetite because of it, because I didn't have that, want the desire to eat because to me, the smell of food became work and I don't want to
Yes.
work.
Yes.
And
Yeah, absolutely. My laptop is a cue for work. And so I can use that to my advantage. At the end of the day, it's almost an emotional ritual to close the laptop. It's much easier for me to then switch into, say, personal activities and hobbies and family stuff.
right.
Um, and I try to minimize working on my phone because my phone comes with me everywhere, like it does for
Mm,
most people. And I
right.
don't want that associated with work. Although I love what I do, we all need to have boundaries and compartments with our work. Otherwise, we'll burn
Right.
out.
My dog is the same way where as soon as I click the button on my mouse to turn it off and I start closing my laptop, whether she's deep asleep or whatever she's doing, she will sit straight up on my lap and start wagging her tail. And it's like,
Yeah,
it's
it's
me
my
time. We're
time
gonna go for
now.
a walk. Yeah. And so sometimes she gets confused because I just turn the mouse off because I'm gonna use the touchpad. And she's like, I don't understand.
I
I thought
thought
we
we
were
were going for a
done.
walk now. That's my cue
Yeah.
for a walk.
That's her
Mm.
cue for a walk. And so sometimes if I'm trying to be sneaky about it, I have to close my laptop like so slowly because it creaks a certain way if I do it at a certain speed, and that's her cue for her. She got her ears just like perk up, and she's like, it's walk time.
Daddy's
And
done work now.
right, yeah, and it's the same way people condition dogs to, really they condition us that we hear the bell ring and we go take them outside. But a lot of people like to believe that we train them, they ring the bell to go outside. No, they're gonna
Yeah.
go to the bathroom whenever they want. They've
Mhm.
trained you to come pick up their poop outside at when they ring the bell.
Yes.
You know,
Yep. Yep.
so it's interesting.
Absolutely.
But we talked about how we subconsciously kind of program or hinder our sleep. So you kind of help us with reprogramming ourselves or setting up a new routine or practicing some things to help undo that damage or prevent further damage. So can you talk a little bit about those methods and practices to help improve our sleep?
Yeah, a lot of them have to do with this relationship with the bed. So if we take an ideal average person who has
Right.
ideal sleep, right? So like a typical situation, it's going to take a certain amount of time to fall asleep, up to 20 minutes, some people 30 minutes, but usually longer than that.
Hour
We
and a
start
half for me.
question marking, like, what's that about? I mean, at your age, yeah, but if you were
Yeah.
70, it would naturally take you longer to fall asleep, right? And it's
Take three
normal to
minutes
wake a
of
couple of
golf.
times in the night. Yeah, it's normal to wake up a couple times at night,
Right.
long enough to remember it, because we actually wake up many, many times. And that's important to remember, because we're going to come back to the contextual cue
Okay.
piece here. And it's normal to take a little time to wake up in the morning. Some people jump up out of bed ready to start the day, and some people it takes a little bit of time for them to get moving. So ideally, this ideal situation, you're not spending more time in bed than that. But what can happen is if people's sleep begins to wobble for whatever reason, something's happened, something's going on,
Right.
and they begin to take the well-meaning advice of go to bed early, for example. If you're really tired and having difficulty sleeping, you go to bed early, but often what happens is the person then lays there awake waiting to get to sleep. They get
Yep.
frustrated about this, so they start worrying
Yep.
about the sleep itself, or they're worrying about what's going to happen the next day if they don't get enough sleep, and they get caught in this hamster wheel. So slowly
Right.
over time, what happens is that person's relationship with bed becomes one of stress and
Mm.
frustration and concern as opposed to sleep. So that makes it harder for the person to fall asleep over time. It actually, these very well-meaning kind of bits of advice that we sometimes get in order to help us get a little bit more rest can actually make sleep worse over time. The place this, and so that is the contextual cue. The bed
Right.
becomes the battleground instead of the place where we're feeling really restful. And we can use that to our advantage. If we're not sleeping, or if we're not feeling relaxed, or if we're awake for many, 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 many hours in bed, it might be a good idea to take that energy someplace else so we can reverse engineer the cue by our actions. So we take that anxious energy, go someplace else, do something relaxing and enjoyable. I usually suggest people don't go and do something boring to try to make themselves sleepy. And I'll tell you
Right.
why in just a minute. But what happens is you go and you do something enjoyable, that arousal comes down. And this is now an opportunity to say, hi, brain, I want to pair this sleepy feeling with the bed again. So we've
Right.
removed the anxious association. And now we're like, oh, here's an opportunity to, like we're training a dog to sit, to train our body. This is where the sleepy feelings belong. And at the beginning, people say, well, I did that for a couple of days. It didn't work. It takes a while for this to work, but it is quite successful because we're essentially manipulating our unconscious to have the response that we want. Another thing that kind of a good takeaway that's safe for everybody to do,
Okay.
you touched on it already, and this is a great way to kind of, I guess, more productively use those moments awake at night, is to not check the time, because
Mm.
checking the time just makes us more anxious. Nobody, including myself, has ever woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning and said, yes, I've gotten 3 hours of sleep. Like nobody does that.
Right.
So if we don't have the ability to know what time it is, we don't have the opportunity to hang our sleep anxiety or anything
Mm,
else on that. And because we wake up multiple times naturally, kind of at the end of each sleep cycle, we come back up into light sleep.
right.
We scan, is there a lion in the room? No. Okay, then we go back to sleep. If we wake up and we have a strong emotional response to the situation, oh, I'm awake, or oh, it's 3 o'clock, I've got an interview tomorrow. If we have a strong emotional response, the brain says, oh, there is a lion in the room, right? So it makes you more likely over time to continue repeatedly waking up at the same time, even though there isn't a lion in the room. If our big human brain interprets that as being a lion, that wake up, that can actually create a habit of creating arousal, anxiousness, and wakefulness in the middle of the night. So taking the
Well,
clocks away can help us unwind that a little bit. Our human brain likes the idea of having lots of data. That's why, everybody's tracking
right.
everything, and there's apps for this and there's apps for that. And sometimes when I suggest to people that they stop looking at the clock, they get really nervous. Like, well, how will I know what time it is? Well, does it
Mhm.
matter what time it is? Because you should be sleeping, right?
Mhm.
You don't have an appointment. You're not going to be late for
Right,
anything.
right.
And it gives our brain this idea that if we have enough data, we can control the sleep and make it do what we want to do. And my kind of favorite
Right.
analogy is that sleeps like love. If you try to force it to be a certain way, it's almost guaranteed to backfire.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, and what's interesting is, when we look at the time, or at least I do this, I'm sure everyone else does it, is you're like calculating like, okay, if I fall asleep within the next 15 minutes, now I'll get this many hours of sleep,
No
which is
pressure.
this minimum. I know it's like no pressure. What I want to touch upon, which is so, I think, very common nowadays, is you said we lightly wake up a lot throughout the night and try not to have that big response because then you're going to put yourself back on high alert. You're going to start this pattern.
Mhm,
A lot of people wake up and check their phones now because there's so much
mhm,
FOMO, fear of missing out in the world. I do it. I check my notifications every time I wake up. And sometimes I even go on my phone and my dog gives me this kind of look because that used to mean, oh, it's time to get up. We're going on the phone. Now she knows this jerk is just looking at his notifications again. So
mhm. And
she's,
have you
thank
ever
goodness she's
missed
smart.
anything that you would have really, really regretted missing if you'd have just slept through it and then checked it 3 hours later?
No, people don't like me texting them at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, and it's always it's whatever. It's nothing that requires my attention. So, and with that, then I'm checking the time and going back on
Mhm.
high alert. It's actually
Yeah.
funny you mentioned the lion in the room. I have raccoons that built a nest in a tree outside my window, and every morning between 2 and 3 a.m. they will just randomly start fighting each other. And, like, I don't know what they're doing. Every day at the same time they do it, and it wakes up my dog and it wakes up me. And I'm
Mhm.
sure long after they're gone, I'll still be waking up at that time because
Yeah.
you form
Yeah.
that.
They're
It's so easy to
playing or
form habits.
fighting, or, I don't know how PG your show is, but
They might be
they're
making
making some
love. It's
noise. Yeah.
no, I didn't know raccoons could make the noises they're making. First off, I never really like heard raccoon noises, let alone it's like this high pitched shrieking, and it's like it sounds like they're just playing, and I'm like, why are you doing this at 3 a.m.? But that's like, their afternoon time for them. So,
Absolutely.
but
Absolutely.
it's interesting. Back when I used to, I mean, I still set alarms, but it's always at a different time now. But in high school and the military, when I had the alarm set for the same time every day, I would always wake up just 5 or 2 minutes before the alarm because I get very, like I said, I'm a very light sleeper, very paranoid person, very anxious person. If there's any noise, I'm like up. It is like we're
Mhm.
on lockdown. We're checking the whole house. I don't do it. The other night, my dog's one of her pens, like a little gate randomly fell. It's been standing for 5 weeks. It randomly fell like at 2 a.m. in the morning. There's suddenly
Bang.
this loud thud in the house. Thought someone broke in and I could not fall. Long after I searched the whole house, right? Checked every nook and cranny, fixed the gate. My heart would not stop pounding. I could not go back to sleep because I'm like, I don't want to fall
Mm.
back asleep and it falls again. But so I don't like my alarm going off because it
Yeah.
like
So
gives me a little heart
you
attack.
essentially trained yourself to wake up just
I
before it
would
went
always
off.
wake up right
Mhm.
before it. Yeah. So think that's interesting that we can do that. I was like, this is
Yeah,
perfect. I don't
yeah.
even need
And
to set the
that
alarm.
emotional response helps us create habits for better or for
Right.
worse. Yeah.
But it also
It's our
gave me,
brain's way of being efficient.
and then I was like tiptoeing. I'm like, I don't even need the alarm. But I will never fall asleep if I don't have the alarm because then you had that fear, like you said, we don't have appointments throughout the night, but we want to wake up at a certain time for whatever reason to go about our day and
Hmm.
everything. And it's definitely interesting how many times we wake up and don't know it, don't notice it. And I remember my mom did, you said we track everything. And my mom got like a Fitband or some kind of watch. It wasn't like an Apple Watch, but it was specifically just to track her sleep. And she was like, every morning she was talking with us kids at breakfast, like, I got only this many hours of deep sleep, true sleep. Like, it looks like I'm sleeping so much, but look how many times I wake up. And
Yeah.
and then she's justifying it. Well, that was when the dog barked. This was when this happened. This was when this happened. And she found it, like you said, humans love analyzing data so much for whatever reason.
Yeah.
We're very curious people. And my
Right.
mom loved that. She's like, look how much sleep I'm getting or lack
Mm,
thereof.
yeah. Yeah. A number
And
two tip I say is if you have difficulty with your sleep, to stop tracking it with those devices.
right, right. Because
They're
it makes
not
you more anxious.
accurate. They're not accurate, particularly with the things that people are most interested in. And they just gave a great example of a certain amount of deep sleep.
My mom is
Most
obsessed
of
with
us
that.
spend 70% of the night in light sleep. So it wouldn't be quote unquote normal to get more than 20% in a night of quote unquote deep sleep.
No.
And that changes through time. The percentage is different for a younger person than it is for somebody who is, over 60, for example. So not only are they not accurate, people don't know how to place that information into context, even if it was accurate. And so what it does is it generates a lot of anxiety that isn't necessarily warranted. I had someone literally book a call with me because they were worried about only getting 20% deep sleep. And it was a sleep education issue that for that
Mm.
person that age, it's a completely normal number.
Right. Well, and my mom has this placebo effect that she formed for herself, where she was like, deep sleep is true sleep, is the only actual time her body gets rested. And so she's looking at those numbers like, I need to get more deep sleep. What did I do? And
Mhm.
all kinds of
Yeah.
stuff.
And the harder
Whereas,
we try to make sleep happen, the more likely it is to backfire. And that
right,
also is because of this arousal system. It says, gee, if Tracy's working really hard on this, she's tracking everything. She's researching every day on Dr. Google, and
right,
she's talking to all of her friends, and she's trying all of these supplements and doing all of this. She must be in real danger. And of course, if the brain perceives we're in danger, it's going to be difficult for us to sleep. So it is one of
right,
those things. It's very different from the rest of life. We get trained. If you work really hard and you follow the rules and you want something really badly and you practice a lot, and that you're going to get the outcome that you want. And sleep is actually exactly the opposite. It's very difficult to take our hands off of the sleeping situation because we've been trained to view it in a certain way and because it's uncomfortable. And most people have been trained to avoid discomfort at all costs, which isn't really necessary. It creates more grief than is
right.
really warranted. But with sleep in particular, if I ask someone, what is your greatest fear about what might happen if you don't sleep well tonight? If the answer is along the lines of, I'm going to be really tired and it's going to be really difficult for me to do certain things, that needs to be put in context of all the potential things that could possibly go wrong for somebody. And
Mm,
I'm not trying to minimize a person's experience because it is miserable and I've been there.
right,
But there's a difference between recognizing that something is uncomfortable and responding to it like you're being attacked. And we want to fix the problem and then throw all of these resources at it as if we're being attacked. And that makes it more
right,
difficult to kind of overcome relative to if we can fit that into a broad experience of potential things that could cause us discomfort. Yeah, it's a mindset shift that really helps with this process.
Right. And going back, you had mentioned you wanted to get back to something to hold the thought. I've been holding it, and I think I know where you're gonna go with it, which is you said if you're gonna have to leave the bed to try I love the word we're gonna reverse engineer sleep. Sounds so cool. It's like it makes me feel so smart. I'm reverse engineering my sleep. This is like genius stuff right here. Leave the bed, go do something you said that is enjoyable or keeps your attention, not boring. And
Mhm.
I can already see if you do something boring or something mundane or something very repetitive, it leaves room for your mind to drift and go back to the I'm not sleeping or overthinking, which is only going to prevent you. So what's going to happen is you're going to do something boring, being like, all right, Miss Tracy said, let's go do something. We're going to go do something. All right. We did whatever boring task it was, who knows? And the whole time you were just thinking about how you can't sleep or whatever it is, you start overthinking about whatever was preventing you from sleeping in the first place. Then you get back in bed and you're like, that didn't work. Now you're just even more frustrated.
Yes,
It's like,
it puts a lot of pressure on the
right. It's
situation
like,
for
now I got
sure.
to go do it again. And it's going to be
Yeah.
even later. And now
Yeah,
you
and
got this
people,
mindset. Now I have to go do something, which is only going
yes.
to make you even more alert.
Yeah. And people often ask, well, what's the thing that I should do because I don't want to wake myself up, right? What if I
Right.
do something fun, I'm going to wake up even more. The
Right.
flip side of that is if you wake up for longer, you're building more physical sleep drive, which
Mm,
then can be used. Doesn't always happen the next night, but you can then build that up and spread that out over time. But my bottom line is I'm very mortality motivated and kind of touching on the fact that, sometimes life experiences make you realize how valuable your days are. Being awake shouldn't be a punishment, no matter when it is. Right. You might have a preference for being asleep at 2 o'clock in the morning, but if you happen to be awake, why not do something you enjoy? The
right.
flip side of that is if you do something you enjoy, your arousal will come down, right? So even if you don't sleep, you feel better about being awake because you're doing something that you enjoy and you're using your very valuable time on this planet in a way that
Right.
serves you instead of I'm going to, no offense to anybody in here who likes reading complicated things, but if you go read something really complicated that you don't understand in the middle of the night, because specifically, even though you hate it, to try to bore yourself to sleep, that's just another way of saying, if I don't sleep, I'm in danger, right?
Right.
I almost try to take in my sleep therapy work the emphasis off the sleep entirely,
Mm,
which sounds kind of
fine.
backwards,
Don't
but
worry about it.
actually
Just
that's
don't
the
worry about
root.
sleeping.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. That would be very dismissive if somebody came to me and said, well, all you have to do is like, stop worrying about it.
Right.
But the question is, well, then how do you operationalize that? And that
Right.
looks very different for different people, right?
Mm,
And that's where the work is. It's almost personal development work to do this. What I was kind of teasing a little bit with the checking
right.
the notifications at night, right? Not doing something that is a habit and a reflex brings stuff up for us. And we all have coping mechanisms for when things are uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable to change a habit, so it brings that kind of stuff up. But you learn through that process too. And on the
Right.
scale of the scale of all the things human beings can do to kind of alleviate discomfort, checking your phone's probably one of the more benign ones. um,
Right.
but yeah, it's
Especially
it's
if you get on social media or start scrolling on the news or something. Oh man, last thing you want to be doing at 2 a.m.
that is the I have completely cleaned my news feed so that I get no news unless I look for it, and I don't look
Hmm.
for it on my phone. So when
Right.
I'm on my phone, it's my happy place. I'm scrolling hobbies and things on my Instagram and on my
Right.
Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And ladies and gentlemen, if you're gonna wake up and check your phone at the middle of the night, you should check out the Couple of Nukes Instagram though. It's pretty good. I did a photo shoot. It's dropping at Oh, I forgot this episode comes out in the future. The photo shoot already drops. You should check it out. It's me and my dog wearing well, she's not wearing anything. She's naked because she's a dog. But I'm wearing all black and white. It was to showcase my new hat. I wore black and white boots, shirt, pants, and everything to match her because she's black and white. But her and I do have matching outfits. I just don't dress her often because she doesn't really like it. And I'm not going to be No offense, don't cancel me, but those pet owners who you know your pet, you know if your pet likes being dressed or not, all right? They make it pretty obvious. You can see it in their eye, you can see their whole soul when
Yeah.
a Chihuahua or a Poodle is you can see when they do not like wearing a certain outfit.
Especially cats. They just lay on the
Oh,
floor and try to disappear.
right. Well, my dog is funny. She'll wear like, shirts and stuff. I got her a little pink cowgirl hat that matches mine. It would be so cute. First, the only thing she will take off, she will whip her head around like a T-Rex trying to kill something. She will not wear the hat. You put the clothes on her, sometimes it's like she's happy. Sometimes she gives me this little sad look, and I'm like, "Oh, don't do that. Don't do that. It's for you. Come on."
Why are you
But
doing this to me?
right. And yeah, so if you do wake up in the middle of the night, you should listen to my podcast. Someone commented on Facebook that they listened to my podcast until they fell asleep, and I didn't know
How do
if
you feel about that?
well, he is a decently aged veteran, and I think he meant it with good intention. But it came off to me as your show is boring, and I used it to fall asleep, and I was like, thanks.
You could take
But
it as a compliment to your voice.
right. Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, check out Radiating Faith, my other podcast, my poetry reading. That should be good for sleeping. I have a poetry voice. I don't know how I do it because I don't do it intentionally. But I listen back and I'm like, why do I read poetry different? And it just comes out different way. But no, I had shared one of my episodes on Facebook, and he commented the next day. He was like, listen to it until I fell asleep. And I was like, okay. I mean, he's 70, uh, at least 60. So I was like, it's all right, you know? It's funny, my grandfather, he never sleeps, is what he claims. That he only, he's like, I only need an hour or so at night. But every time we look over on the couch, he's passed out. And then, he'll do like these little power naps. And his excuse was, he's like, no, I was just checking my eyelids for holes, making sure they were still all there. But his chair is where he sleeps, where he watches TV, and he never leaves it. And so he ends up sleeping
Mhm.
commonly throughout the day because it's the place of comfort, is his home nest. It's funny actually. It's a massage chair, and it's a remote that he pushes to raise the chair and have him it stands him up out of the chair. He doesn't even have to get
Mhm.
up out of the chair. It actually stands him up out of it. But he'll stay there, and then he'll end up sleeping in it every night at falling asleep at 3 a.m.
Mhm.
watching the news or golf or something. And
Mhm.
so he doesn't even like the bed isn't even a sleep place to him. It's the recliner is the sleep place. It's also the
Yeah, I
the
know a lot of
kitchen and the
people
dining
whose
room and the
sleep
living
place
room.
is the couch, and this is another contextual cue thing too. Just
Mm,
that's what you're kind of alluding to. People have
right,
difficulty sleeping in bed, and they get up and they go watch television and they fall asleep on the sofa. Do that repeatedly.
right,
You got two problems to overcome if you ever want to sleep back in that bed with your partner again.
right,
One is never resolving the issue with being able to sleep in bed, but also you've got temptation. I can sleep on the sofa because it's a no pressure environment. Nobody gets
right.
on the sofa initially and says, oh, I really have to sleep. They get into bed and they say, I
Mm,
really. But what you raise also is around sleep structuring. This happened in the pandemic when I don't know exactly what happened in the state where you were,
right,
but we essentially had 9 weeks of you don't leave the house except to go to the grocery store, the emergency room, or and so people's structures, their whole life structure went out the window. Well, that happens every day when people retire and they don't have something to do.
right,
They don't have to get up at a certain time. They can take a nap, 3 hour nap in the afternoon. They can go to bed whenever they
right,
want to. And as we get older, our sleep is different. So newborns, they don't have to be awake for very long to build up enough physical sleep drive that they go right back to sleep.
right,
The typical person, 20 to 40, maybe a little bit longer for men. It changes a little bit for women around then, 20 minutes to fall asleep. But the older we get, instead of a sharp drop into sleep, people could see that kind of a
mm,
steep trajectory into sleep. It almost becomes more like skidding a rock across the
mm.
top of a lake,
Well, that's
and it kind of
interesting.
bumps along, so the angle of that dive into sleep is much shallower, and because sleeping difficulty is arousal based, constantly bumping up, bumping up, bumping up. So a lot of people will sleep
Hmm.
in very light sleep to the point they feel like they haven't slept at all, which might be
Right.
what's happening in a situation like that. They used to call this paradoxical insomnia. And it's
Right.
just, it's almost like you're sleeping, but there's a part of your brain that is awake and is watching what's going on. It happens to me when I'm really
I have
stressed
that.
out. My partner will elbow me and I'll say, "Why did you elbow me?" And he will say, "Well, you were snoring. I want you to roll over." And I was like, "I wasn't snoring. I was thinking about this and I was thinking about that and I was thinking about this and that." And he's like, "No, well, you were snoring." So I guess I was asleep, but there's a piece of me that was awake and was monitoring and thinking and, you know,
I
being
have that
semi-awake.
as well, but I suffer from night terror conditions. I have, such vivid dreams and nightmares that I'm a little violent in my sleep. I'm a little screaming. I'm a little talking. I'm a little
Mhm.
complaining about people in my sleep. That's awesome. A Navy saying is you're not a real sailor unless you're complaining. So the fact that I do it in my sleep, like who was it? Like I said, when we were on vacation, my sisters and I would share a room, and sister one time she was like, "You were talking in your sleep, talking about how you didn't want to take out the trash, and you were arguing with dad." And I was like, "This is awesome. This is I think I need to get back to writing poetry before bed and expelling some of those emotions because I bring a lot with me when I go to bed. Finally, when I do fall asleep. And I'm also a sugar addict, and I've tried cutting that down because that does not help the nightmare factor that, really propagates it. And also
Yeah.
trying to cut back being on my phone or doing video games or TV right before bed as well because that all
Stimulating
puts
things.
imagery into my mind. So yeah,
Yeah,
so trying
yeah. I
to
mean, anything that
work
is
on that.
particularly exciting or potentially upsetting, it's good to leave that stuff for
Right.
earlier in the day. Even for me, I have little projects I get excited about them, but I have to kind of keep them in the
Right.
laptop. So when I close the laptop, I can do other things. You mentioned nightmares, and it
Right.
might be of particular interest to your audience, at least based on what I
Mm.
know, military veterans I know in my life.
Right.
If people are struggling with repetitive nightmares or repetitively themed nightmares, check with your provider about imagery rehearsal therapy. It's sometimes called imagery rescripting. It's very, very, very helpful for repetitive nightmares because what happens is because our brain's really good at creating habits and habit loops that are
Right.
based on emotion, it's almost like it's this is going to date me. Oh my gosh. It's almost like a skip on a record. It just goes back and goes back and goes back and loops
Right.
back and loops back. So it almost becomes a habit to replay it.
Mm.
You get to a certain point in the night and that the time of night or the number of sleep cycles that the person's already had triggers that loop. And so that program plays, and that program is whatever the nightmare is. But there are ways of working with that that can be really helpful.
Yeah, it's so funny. I have such a vivid imagination, and my nightmares are so wild, and it's such a large range, and I remember them pretty well. Had a nightmare. I got three like 1 star and 1/2 star reviews on my show, and I was like, "Oh my goodness!" But
It's
I was
obviously
looking at my
important to you
reviews
not to have
before,
that
but
happen.
yeah, I'm trying to get my rating up on Apple Podcasts. Everyone, please go give me a star rating. Be honest about it, but like. If you give me 4 stars because you think the episodes are too long, that really pisses me off. I'm a long form podcast. I don't know what to tell you. I hate people leaving that review. And if you leave a review saying, I didn't think talking about nuclear war and nuclear missiles would be something interesting, but it is. I know for a fact you didn't listen to the show because someone left a review like that. We don't talk about nuclear weapons on the show. So I know you didn't listen to the episode. You lied. But yeah, I was gonna say what's funny. Now I'm gonna have the nightmare tonight because I'm thinking about it. But it's like having their continuing nightmare that instead of most people, it's like you show up to work and you don't have pants on or something. But I was gonna be like, I had a nightmare. I was on my show and I didn't have my hat, and all like I was wearing it, and then all of a sudden it was gone. But what
Nightmare
my
content
point
is
being,
really personal because we
oh
all
yeah,
have vulnerabilities that are very
yep,
specific to our particular
all right.
psyche.
It might be your
Mhm.
dad saying no matter how many books you write or how many submarines you go on, you'll never be anything to him. But who knows? I was gonna say what's interesting is the reason I brought it up is you talked about the paradoxical insomnia, where you light sleep so much that you still feel exhausted because of the mental toll sometimes that my night terrors take on me. Sometimes I can have slept for a set amount of hours. They're always changing how much it's supposed to be. A few years ago, it was 7 hours. Now it's 8 or 9. Now there are new reports saying women should sleep 10 to 12 hours. And I was like, that's the last thing. No offense,
Hmm.
that's the last thing most young women need to hear. They're already
Hmm.
sleeping. Because I honestly believe that women sleep more than men. I think I don't know what it is based on it. I think maybe women just worry less. I think men just think too much. Men are problem solvers, you know. I've seen that in relationships, which is part of the issue, rather than just listen to women and be like, honey, that's whatever. Sometimes we like to advise and problem solve. And I think that,
Hmm.
especially at night, we're thinking about the family, the job, this and that. Not that women don't have responsibilities, but I think they just scroll on TikTok and then go to bed. They're like, ooh, water talk,
Mm.
which is speaking of, I haven't seen this in young men, but I have seen it in a lot of young women I know. They can no longer go to the bathroom if they are not scrolling on social media. Like they have trouble. They have programmed themselves because
Yep,
obviously they weren't born scrolling on social media to go to the bathroom.
absolutely. Their body
But I've
knows how to
seen
do it without a phone in their hand,
right.
and it
And if
it
you
creates
disagree with that, I'm telling
problems.
you, I'm telling you it's true.
I've been trying to tell our boys since they were, well, phone holding age. It
Which
doesn't
nowadays is
help
out of
you
the womb.
at all to sit there and watch YouTube while you are going to the
Right.
bathroom.
So you get
Because
hemorrhoids
it's going to train your body to take, well, let's just take an hour to achieve this basic bodily function that shouldn't take very long. And that creates
most of the time.
problems.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
creates
no, but it's
it
it's
creates problems
interesting.
biologically, but also like, do you have to wake up an hour early because your body takes that long to kind of do what it needs to do in the morning? That's unhealthy. It's really unhealthy.
Well, I mean, I can understand in the morning you gotta like warm up, it's like everything's been shut down, everything's cold, you gotta warm up a little bit. I understand that part. But yeah, it's just interesting. But what's interesting too, ironically, is some people have developed it where they can't fall asleep unless they scroll on social media first. But they associate that with comfort. It's like I worked all day,
Yep.
I didn't have my phone. Now I have my 5 minutes of whatever time before bed. And I had to switch my habits because I used to like to read the Bible before bed. But then I would fall asleep while reading it and I wouldn't remember it. I'm like, no, this
Yeah,
is
that's
exactly
my
how I'm
problem
gonna go
with
to
reading
hell. I was
too.
like,
I don't remember it.
I know reading really helps me fall asleep at night, but I'm like, I I don't want to read anything I don't want to not remember. Like
Yeah.
I want to remember it, right? I don't want to read just to
You
fall
could read
asleep.
that one passage every night for the rest of your life.
I I know. It's like I want
Yeah.
to read and remember it. I don't want to read something. And I mentioned to you when we had a phone call, kind of there's some new forms of podcasts that are out that are like people reading lists to you. I have friends who military guys who can't fall asleep without ASMR, and
Mhm.
sometimes a lot of anime girls talking to them about how they're a good boy and they can sleep now. But there's
Mhm.
also just like sound ones, like, and my dad back before there was ASMR stuff, had a little radio with white noise on it. There was a
Mhm.
ocean channel and this channel, and a lot of people get so used to sleeping with noise, especially if they grow up in a
Yep.
household with other people. If you're in the military, I'll tell you, you have to get used to sleeping with alarms, machinery, noises,
No,
other
and
people,
noise, and
and
it's
I tell
it's
you,
interesting. These things become associated with sleep, just on the noise bit. Spent a lot of time living in big cities. One of the quietest places I ever went was the desert in Jordan, and it was so quiet. The
huh?
wind was blowing, but you couldn't hear it. It was so quiet. I laid awake all night long because it was too quiet to sleep. Isn't that wild? But
I get it though.
all of these things, there's nothing inherently wrong with white noise. There's nothing inherently wrong or right about listening to, sleep sounds or any of these things. They are neutral in and of themselves. They can help people sometimes distract from more arousal provoking kind of lines of thinking, right? So they can serve a
Right.
purpose, but they can become a problem if, say, the person doesn't have their phone, or they don't have their particular kind of almost becomes like a crutch. They don't
You're
have the crutch
reliant on
available.
it.
And if the first response is, if I don't get that time to do that thing, I'm scared I'm not going to sleep, then it's almost become a bit of a problem.
Right.
Um, when, again, on that brief call, sleep hygiene is, you go online, or your doctor says to you, well, just, improve your sleep hygiene, make sure your room is cool and your room is dark, and you tick all these, having a bath an hour and a half before bed, and all these things are neutral. They're helpful for some people. These things focus on blocking intrusion from the outside. If there's still a fear of not sleeping that underlies anything that we do on purpose related to sleep, then it can potentially backfire for us, because it's still sending that message. If we don't sleep, we're in danger. If I don't have my phone, my TikTok time, I'm in danger. If
Right.
there's light poking in the sides of the blinds, I'm in danger. And it's the perception of fear that's the problem, rather than the actual circumstances.
Right. Well, it's funny because most people associate, the darkness with sleep and this and that. And we stayed at a hotel once, my family, where the bedrooms had no windows at all. They were inside the hotel and only the living room had a window.
Mhm.
And that vacation, we would all just keep going back to bed thinking we had no windows. And
Mhm.
it was not everyone was sleeping with cell phone at the time. This was several years ago. And it was like, and we didn't, it was vacation time. So we're like, oh, we'll go back to sleep. We can sleep in a little bit. And then we
Mhm.
would wake up and be like, it was 12 in the afternoon.
You have no
And,
idea
it
what
was just
time it
pitch
is.
black.
And
And so for the military, which we'll use this to transition into rotating shift work, I had to buy blackout curtains because
Mhm.
I cannot sleep if it's daytime. And I can't
Mhm.
sleep if I know that I'm pretending to make it nighttime, which doesn't help because
Mhm.
the blackout curtains are nice. They can make it dark, but I'm like, it's 1400. People are out getting lunch right now. How am I going to sleep? I'm awful sleeper, but I know you work especially with healthcare workers and rotating shift workers. And, you know, how is it, you said habits take a long time to form. And unfortunately, we can have these schedules, some of us, where we're changing our sleep rotation every now and then. So, like, can you shed a little hope on those people who are thinking, like, Miss Tracy, I'd love to form this habit, but I've got to change every few days or every few weeks. Is, can I make it zoom out bigger picture? I have this cycle now, and there's habits
Mhm.
within the cycle that is part of one big habit. Like, can you
Yeah,
talk about
yeah.
that for a little bit?
So it's approached a little bit differently depending on whether the person's going to continue to work shifts, and what the
Mm,
shift cycle is it going to remain as it is, or is somebody going to be transitioning off of working shifts or going to a more stable shift situation. The circadian rhythm element is the element that's kind of problematic there, and that usually has to be addressed first if the person's going to be transitioning to a more stable kind of schedule,
right.
because you can have a circadian rhythm disruption and then also on insomnia on top of that, right? So insomnia isn't just not sleeping. So I could have jet lag, uh, flying to the US to go see my folks. I could have jet lag and be awake at 4 in the morning. Well, that's a circadian rhythm issue. It's not early
Mm,
morning awakening insomnia. So dealing with the biological element first is really important. But if you're in a situation where shifts are constantly changing, and that's just, you're not going to change jobs anytime soon, it's just the situation that you're in. A, um, I'm sure there are various petitions floating around. It doesn't work for all professions. Hospitals have to be staffed and security has to be maintained in different places.
oh yeah.
To organize the work, help organize the workforce so that individuals are not having to do this.
Mm,
That's a good thing to do. But if you're in that situation, we sometimes talk about sleep diaries and sleep tracking, and sorting a shift working situation out could take like a, a lot of episodes to go over, but in
mm,
brief, instead of writing down all the times that you're awake and you're asleep, I would suggest that you graph it out on graph paper and shade when you're awake and when you're asleep over a few
mm,
rotations of your shift, and see where the sleeping overlaps across all of those, or is close. And I would focus on those periods of time to make those as consistent as possible. Because if you can make that sleep as deep as possible, it's going to be easier to function when your shift changes.
mm.
I mean, I'm not a circadian specialist, but that approach has been helpful for people who've come to me who have insomnia and a rotating shift type of schedule.
So maximizing the sleep time that we do have in that
Yeah, and
overlap
making it
so we
as
can,
consistent as
right,
possible. Yeah. So if you notice, hey, there's this period of time that always overlaps no matter, or I could sleep in this time and it overlaps across all of my shifts or 2 out of 3 of my shifts or a certain percentage of the days across, even if you're usually awake and maybe doing errands at that time, if you can make that time as consistent as possible, do your errands some other time and sleep in that block so that your body is always
right.
sleeping in that block or as frequently as possible sleeping in that
Mhm.
block. That's helpful.
So luckily as a podcaster, I get to be an expert without actually being a accredited expert on anything. So here's my expert advice on sleep as I'm not a sleep therapist or anything like that, not a sleep coach, not a sleep therapist. I don't even sleep on my own. I don't even sleep as we've discussed. I barely see myself, but I can give you an expert advice here because I am relatively intelligent, which is don't use alcohol to fall asleep. That is bad. I have seen it. It is very common in the military. It's very common in law enforcement. I'm not sure about nursing side. I don't know if nurses go home and get drunk and fall asleep. I haven't really interacted with them, but I remember back on prototype when we were doing, as I mentioned to you, which is the worst kind of schedule in my opinion. You've got 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., day shift. Then you've got 12 p.m. to 12 a.m. swing shift. And then you've got 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. midnights. And they would call it SWIDs and have these parties where everyone would just get drunk to transition from swings to midnights. And I've seen a lot of military members use alcohol to fall asleep. That's how my father, between his insomnia and working rotating shift work as a police officer, I think that's one of the things that greatly fueled his alcoholism was needing alcohol to go to sleep. I mean, he
Mm,
needs it to do anything, but especially sleeping, he would just drink until he fell asleep. For some of us, that's one beer. For some of us, that's a whole bottle of whatever it is. It's different for everyone, but I would not advise that. I know a lot of people take it as an easy option compared to habit forming. It's much quicker to just drink until we black out, then, look at our circadian rhythm, look at when we're sleeping, track this stuff, or put in that effort, of, hey, I'm gonna miss out on a little sleep tonight to help start forming this habit. Like you said, we're worried about getting every minute of sleep that we can. We want every single minute of sleep that we can. And really it's such a privilege to be awake and living life. And in the long run, if you need to be awake, doing whatever to separate your bed and your comfort and
mhm.
your anxiety from being all entangled as it is with most people, that little bit of sleep that you're sacrificing is gonna play a huge benefit in the long run. Whereas the sleep you're
Absolutely.
getting from the alcohol abuse, uh, in the long run, I think is going to be very detrimental to your health. Again, not an expert, but
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
anyone
Yeah.
can say that. I've seen it destroy a lot of
It's
lives.
true. It's so true. And if you can look at it this way, having to take a little time and effort to do almost like that personal development work around the mindset of, do I have to fear this or and how do I respond to this? Having to do that's a bit of a first world problem, really. And you are absolutely right that alcohol, it's got its additional problems, right?
Right.
It functions to help us. If we drink enough of it, we will pass out. But we kind of don't care so much about the things that worry us when we're kind of a little buzzed, right? And people find that helpful for falling asleep. But what is often missed, because people are often passed out rather than
Right.
actually sleeping all night, is if we look at the sleep stages and the impact that alcohol has on those,
Right.
stage 3 sleep is our most restorative, deepest sleep. And it basically deletes it. And it doesn't take very much. And if you drink regularly and in
Mm.
sufficient quantities, even when you stop, it can take a long time for that restorative sleep to actually come. It's not like it's
Mm.
just on the night.
So my dad
Um,
doesn't have insomnia. He's just an alcoholic. You've
I
answered
mean,
it. He's
and of course, alcohol has other pervasive
right.
health and psychological and social consequences to its use. But if,
Right.
just talking about the sleep piece, It doesn't create sleep, and
It like
it
deletes that. Huh?
destroys the most important part of our sleep. And so people appear to be sleeping. They feel like they have slept. They wake up, they feel horrific. They wake up late and maybe feel horrific. And then
All
they
right.
drink energy drinks all day long. And then their brain is
Shout out to
wired
the military.
and around they
Yeah.
go. And then they feel like they need to calm down again so that they can quote unquote
Right.
sleep, which isn't the real sleep. And they get stuck in that circle.
Right. And ladies and gentlemen, I meant to mention a while back, there is an episode of SpongeBob SquarePants. Amazing show. It's super funny. Don't ban your kids from watching it. It's not that bad. There's an episode where he can't fall asleep and he's got work the next day or whatever it is. And it's about him doing everything he can to fall asleep, drinking warm milk, reading bedtime stories, running around the house trying to do a workout to fall asleep. And it's like, if I do a couple push-ups and run around, I'll get tired. And I remember it ends with Patrick, his best friend. For those of you who don't watch the show, it's like, oh, you know, my parents used to make this beverage that would put them to sleep, and he gives it to him. It turns out it's coffee. He goes, "Oh, sorry, they use this to wake up. I thought you were trying to stay awake." And he gave him like a whole mug of coffee, and now SpongeBob's all wired and like his eyes are bloodshot, and so it's pretty funny. But kind of just talking about the alcohol, and you mentioned the energy drinks also. A
Mhm.
lot of people are drinking energy drinks, coffee, even caffeinated tea, and oftentimes too close to their sleeping hours. That's a huge issue, especially in the military. And I've always been very, I don't want to say anti-energy drinks. I just, for me personally, I feel like you're doing yourself a disservice, when you're becoming reliant on these things, when you're training your body to need these things, when you're not having your body develop its own energy and resilience. Also mentally, I think you're breaking down that resilience for yourself. And same thing
Mhm.
with melatonin is a huge word thrown around for people who can't sleep. They're like, just go to the store,
So
and
glad you raised melatonin as an issue.
oh yeah,
Keep
yeah.
going.
I was like,
I'll
or
chime
just
in.
like here in the U.S. I know you mentioned it's a little different in the UK, but I know in the US, I'm pretty sure you can buy anywhere or ZQL, NyQuil, whatever you want. There's alternatives. I think melatonin is pushed as the most natural one, the safest one. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a pharmacist. I'm the exact opposite of that. I don't believe in half that stuff. But I especially don't believe in just taking certain amounts of chemicals to fall asleep. Even if melatonin is naturally made in the body, what you're doing is, and I've researched it. I've talked to some different people, and one of the theories was that your body makes melatonin so you can sleep, but if it is getting an outward supply, it's gonna be like, well, we already have melatonin. We don't need to make as much, or we don't need to make it. And then when
Mhm.
you lose that outside supply, it's going to take time for your body to register that. And now you really can't sleep because your body's not making the proper chemicals
Mm.
needed. And then if you have too much of it, now I don't know if maybe you'll have trouble waking up or whatever it may be. Like I said, I haven't researched it
Nightmares.
too much, but you definitely,
It's
I
a
just,
minefield.
so
And
if you
you're
want to get
doing
into it.
that falls into that trying really hard to sleep category from a psychological point of view. But the
Right.
melatonin piece in particular is really interesting because everybody says, "Oh, well, our brain makes it, so it must be safe." It's not necessarily safe for everybody. That's why in a lot of countries, United States not being one of them, but in a lot of countries, it's regulated and available by prescription only because it also impacts heavily on growth hormones and those sorts of things. That's why they're very careful about prescribing for children, for example.
Right.
But the biggest issue is that if you look at all of the major medical association guidelines for the treatment of insomnia, you look at all of the major sleep associations all around the world, melatonin is not indicated for helping people with their insomnia. There's definitely a strong placebo effect here. The way that the melatonin works, our dim light melatonin onset actually happens much earlier than we think. That
Mm.
process has already started. If you take a melatonin tablet and you say you fell asleep in 5 minutes, that is very likely that there's a placebo effect in there because that process
Right.
has been going already, and your brain can only, our brain generates like picograms of this stuff. It's really, really tiny amounts. It doesn't need very much. It's not going to use that. People start with 1 milligram and they're like, oh, it quote unquote didn't work. It didn't work in quotes because you're doing it because you're terrified of not sleeping. So of course you still don't sleep. So then you
Right.
increase the dose and increase the dose and increase the dose and increase the dose. The brain's not taking that really on board. I mean, it's a finely balanced
It's awful.
system. It does its best to kick off any extra. And the other issue with food supplements, which would fall into that category, is that they're not regulated. And there was a couple of really excellent studies looking at over-the-counter melatonin in the States and in Canada, and assessing them. If this says 5 milligrams, like how much does it have across board? So they looked at lots of brands and lots of samples, and they found
Right.
everything from, it's got 4,000 times the amount of active ingredients. It has 3% of the
Wow.
active ingredient. They actually found some melatonin samples had serotonin in them, which is it's dangerous to take. You can't take that. So I guess I would say, I can preach all day long about why you shouldn't take melatonin for
Right.
lots of different reasons, but we don't know what we're taking when we take it over the counter. If you're going to take something over the counter, again, I'm not a doctor or a pharmacist either, but there are third-party tested options where at least they've been tested to say they have in them what they have in them, and you're probably not going to find them in the bottom shelf in the supplement aisle at your local big
Hmm.
box store. You're going to have to look for them.
Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, don't be overdosing on melatonin. Don't
Get
chug alcohol
nightmares.
before bed.
Yeah.
Don't chug alcohol mixed with NyQuil. Definitely don't do that one.
Oh,
And
it makes me
so,
feel ill thinking about
yeah, I was gonna
it.
say, so don't do that. What you should do is check out the link in the description below for Ms. Tracy's website. But Ms. Tracy, if you also want to plug that, best way to contact you and reach you again works via Zoom. So everyone here in the States and wherever else you're listening to this podcast, shout out to all my international listeners that you can work with Ms. Tracy. You might mess up her sleep schedule to fix yours because it'll be whatever time via the across the world. But read her email. It says, I work in many time zones. I am a
I
time
do.
traveler, you know,
Yes, I work
paraphrasing a little
across
bit.
many time zones. Some time zones it's very difficult for me to work with clients in New Zealand, for example,
Right.
because yeah, the logistics of the time zones. But people can find me on Instagram, Tracy the Sleep Coach, and my website, tracythesleepcoach.co.uk. You can actually book a free 20-minute chat with me to see if your sleeping situation might be something that I can help with. So it's kind of a no commitment way to make sure that it's the right match.
No, that's perfect. Last thing I hate is to pay y'all this money and then you're like, oh, you actually have some other medical condition and I can't treat that. So appreciate
Yeah, I try to
that free
screen for all of those
consultation.
things
Yeah.
beforehand so we don't get into that situation. But the chat's
Right.
really useful, particularly if you're going to be working with somebody for a while.
Right.
You make sure you get on a little bit. It's not like pulling teeth.
Right. Awesome. So, Miss Tracy, before we close out here, to wrap it all up in a bow, I was gonna do it, but you know what? I'll let you do it because you're the sleeping therapist. Kind of summarize everything we did here for basically how we can tackle our insomnia or perceived insomnia, whatever, whether it's just not being able to sleep at night, whether it's insomnia or not, you know, big keyword I do want you to focus on is the internal versus the external.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's completely normal to have external or situational things that disturb us. But if you've got the feeling that your sleeping difficulties are being generated by the stress of not sleeping, and you're not falling asleep all day long, you might have insomnia. But you can get the first and foremost, get screened by somebody who knows what they're doing so that you know what you're dealing with, because there are over 85 different sleep disorders.
Oh,
There are
don't say
different treatment
that.
approaches. Sleep therapy is not appropriate for sleep apnea, for example. So knowing what you're
Right.
dealing with first, I would say, if I had to take a few top tips from the things that we've discussed, ditch the watches and trackers if you have any sleep difficulty, because they're not accurate and they're just giving you a place to hang your sleep anxiety. If you don't work shifts, one thing we didn't talk too much about is the importance of waking up at the same time of day, regardless of how you've slept, if you have sleeping difficulties. If you don't, then you get some flexibility there. But that is a really important anchor for the entire biological
Mm,
and psychological system. I think having good boundaries and compartments for quiet activities that you enjoy in the evening that are for you versus stressful things and work and family and obligations and commitments during the day, having those healthy compartments can help set you up for sleep a little bit better. I would say don't obsessively follow sleep hygiene rules. If the rules are telling you to do something that you don't actually like doing, you don't want to be doing something you don't like to do to try to make sleep happen, because it goes back into that reinforcing the idea that there's a situation that's threatening. It's uncomfortable, yes, but you're not being chased by a lion. And that mindset shift is probably the most important part of working with sleep, not only in the short term. It can dropping the anxiety around not sleeping helps sleep in the short term. Developing lifelong resilient sleep, that's where that personal development work comes in, because we're all going to be thrown things that disrupt our sleep. And the more
That is true.
calmly we can respond to those things over time, the less and less likely we are to have ongoing sleeping issues.
Yeah, so if you're parents and you've got those toddlers who are just awake all night and sleep all day, just if you fix their sleep, you'll fix your sleep. Don't worry. But yeah, uh, I know that's an audience we didn't get to talk to too much, which is new parents or just parents who have
Yes.
young children can definitely be disruptive to your sleep. But like you said, no matter whether you have sleeping issues or not, we're all going to be faced with outliers, especially externally and internally too, that are going to disrupt our sleep. And we just have to be prepared for that and, cope with it properly. Otherwise, it can start that snowball effect of a long chain of worsening events to the point
Mhm.
that it's like this, the less you sleep, the more you can't sleep, you know,
Absolutely.
basically to summarize
It
it.
takes a life on of its own. The
Right.
toddlers example is perfect. Yes, our toddlers will wake us up, and that's just a kind of fact of life.
Yeah.
But I've worked with a lot of parents of young children whose kids are sleeping now, but they aren't, because they're in this habit of waking up, and now they're distressed by it, and it's the distress that's creating more and more problems.
Right. Well, Miss Tracy, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm hoping that we helped some people here. And, like I said, it was near and dear to me because I can't sleep. And I know I've seen a lot of my shipmates are just, can't sleep. And then it really affects their personal life and their stress as well. You're already in the military in a stressful environment, or even getting out, you want to, have a new life. And you got this, you can't sleep, and then so you're irritable, you're short-tempered. It affects your relationships, it affects your
Mhm.
ability to focus and concentrate on work. So again, it's also to be alive and awake, but we do want to be taking care of our bodies and getting that proper amount. And so for those of you who have just accepted defeat, or just like, you know what, I just can't sleep and I'm just gonna, it is what it is, it's my existence. It's hard for y'all sometimes to see the impact it is having on your life truly. So definitely take a step back and really look at it.
So
Sailing through the ocean blue, nuclear reactors my crew, guiding the ship, the stars as our guide. Through the waves we ride, jokes and laughter fill the air. On this voyage we have to share, working together, side by side. As one family we will abide. In the heart of the ship we reside, nuclear operators with pride, powering the vessel with every stride. Our mission, a source of great pride.